don't remember the moment the alarms started. I just remember the colour. The screens across the observation deck filled with a light that didn't belong here, structured, almost serene, cutting through the static haze of the early universe like a blade through fog. I was stationed on relay vessel Kepri 7, a ship designed not for war, not for trade, but for watching. We floated on the edge of silence, our task simple, to listen for the whispers of galaxies being born, when the cosmos was still young and violent. Most of the time, it was routine. We stared at chaos, scattered clumps of stars, clouds collapsing under gravity, raw and messy. That was what the early universe was supposed to be. Disorder, dust, collisions, no symmetry, no beauty yet. But then I saw it. The data first came as an anomaly, just numbers scrolling too neatly, redshift measurements that didn't line up, star velocity maps showing curves where there should be knots. At first, I thought it was system error, a faulty calibration, until we cleared the feed. And there it was on the central display, a spiral galaxy, clear arms coiling outward like ribbons, a bright central bulge, dense with stars, a disk so clean it looked like it had been carved with intent. I froze. My training screamed that this was wrong. Spiral galaxies weren't supposed to exist this early. The universe at that time was less than 1 billion years old, still forming, still chaotic. Order like this wasn't possible. Run it again, I told Duran, my systems tech. My voice cracked, but he obeyed. Data streamed once more, same result. Spiral morphology, he whispered. At Z around 10, that's impossible. I leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding in my ears. Stars shouldn't align like this. Not yet. It was like finding a fully grown tree in a desert just seeded with spores. The rest of the crew gathered behind me. Some gasped, some laughed nervously, as if the image itself was mocking our understanding of physics. Captain Arian frowned, arms crossed. "Name it," she said flatly, voice carrying the weight of someone who already knew this discovery would haunt us. One of the younger cadets murmured, "Zhúlóng." The word hung in the air, an old myth, the torch dragon, something that brought both fire and shadow. I didn't know if it was awe or dread that made us all fall silent. The first hours were chaos. Everyone had a theory. Gravitational lensing must be distortion. No, the data consistency rules that out. Maybe it's an illusion, overlapping clusters. Clusters don't align into arms. Look at the density waves. I stayed quiet, just watching the feed cycle. The galaxy rotated slowly, peacefully, too peacefully, because the more I stared, the more wrong it looked. Not just improbable, unnatural. I should have reported my suspicion then. I should have raised my voice. Instead, I watched. And the longer I watched, the stronger the feeling grew. This wasn't born, it was made. That night, if you could call it night aboard a vessel where clocks were the only measure of time, I found myself alone in the observation dome. The galaxy hovered in the black, impossibly distant, impossibly structured. I whispered to myself, "Why are you here?" No answer, of course, just the hum of the ship, the pulse of recycled air. But I swear, though maybe it was exhaustion, I felt like the arms of Zhúlóng shifted as I looked, just slightly, enough to make my chest tighten. I closed my eyes and told myself it was paranoia, data fatigue. Astronomers saw patterns everywhere. It was part of the job. But when I opened them again, the curve of the stars still looked like it was staring back. The next morning, Captain Arian gathered us. "We'll send a full report to the council," she said. Her voice was sharp, almost defensive, as if daring anyone to object. "This will change everything we know about galactic formation. Prepare your logs." Jiran leaned towards me and whispered, "Do you think they'll even believe us?" I almost laughed. They'll believe the data. But inside, doubt gnawed at me, because belief was one thing, understanding was another. And something told me this galaxy wasn't waiting to be understood. 3 days into observation, we caught the first irregularity. The photometric scans showed faint variations, not random, but rhythmic. A pulse, slow, subtle, like a heartbeat woven into the light itself. At first, no one noticed. Numbers can hide behind their own complexity, but Jiran flagged it, and when we graphed the intervals, the room went cold. Uniform spacing, almost deliberate. Captain Aryan dismissed it as rotation artifacts, but I saw the fear in her eyes when the pattern repeated over and over. The universe was speaking in a language we didn't understand, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if we were supposed to. By the fourth day, the dreams began. I don't dream often, not on long assignments. The meds we take usually keep sleep dreamless, but I dreamt of spirals, burning green against black. I dreamt of voices I couldn't place, whispers in tones like static. When I woke, I didn't tell anyone until I found Jiran at breakfast, pale and shaking. "Did you hear them too?" he asked. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I just nodded, and the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. That was the moment I knew. Whatever Zhúlóng was, galaxy, illusion, or something else, it wasn't silent. And the longer we listened, the louder it became. The crew meetings started on day 7. Captain Aryan called them data review sessions, but we all knew better. These were arguments disguised as science. "We need to sanitize the report," said Dr. Voss, our senior astrophysicist. She was old school, the kind who believed the universe followed rules, not whims. "Strip out the anomalies, focus on the core discovery." Jiran slammed his tablet down. "Sanitize? We're talking about rhythmic light patterns, structured emissions. You want to pretend they don't exist? I want us to sound credible." Voss's voice carried that particular edge scientists use when their worldview is cracking. "The council won't take us seriously if we include ghost stories." But I wasn't listening to their debate anymore. I was watching the live feed from Zhúlóng on the wall display, and the galaxy looked different, brighter maybe, or more focused, like it was paying attention to our conversation. What if it knows we're watching? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to stare at me. "What did you say?" Captain Aryan's voice was dangerously calm. I cleared my throat, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "The patterns. They started after we made contact. What if they're reactive? What if Zhúlóng is responding to observation?" Dr. Voss laughed, but it sounded forced. "Galaxies don't respond. They're collections of stars and gas, not entities." "Then explain the dreams," said Engineer Kartik from the back of the room. He'd been quiet until now, the kind of man who kept his thoughts locked up tight. "Half the crew is having them, same imagery, same system." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Captain Aryan's face went pale. "What dreams?" she asked. Kartik looked around the room as if checking for permission to speak. Spirals, green fire, and something calling, like it wants us to come closer. I felt my stomach twist. Because he was right. The dreams were spreading and they were getting stronger. Last night I'd woken up with the taste of copper in my mouth and the absolute certainty that something vast and ancient was trying to speak to me through the darkness between stars. "Medical," Captain Aryan said sharply. "Full crew psychological evaluation, starting today." But even as she spoke, I could see the doubt in her eyes, because she was having the dreams too. We all were. The council's response came 2 days later, transmitted across 13 billion light-years of space with the cold efficiency of bureaucracy. "Fascinating discovery. Deploy extended observation protocols. Do not approach without authorization. Xenobiology team being assembled for consultation." Xenobiology, as if Zhúlóng might be alive. The word hung in the transmitted text like a smoking gun. Someone on the council thought we'd found more than just an impossible galaxy. They thought we'd found something that might think back. Captain Aryan read the message aloud, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "They want us to maintain position for 90 days, full spectrum analysis, gravitational mapping, electromagnetic monitoring." 90 days, Dr. Voss whispered. 90 days of this. I understood her fear. The dreams were bad enough after a week. What would they be like after 3 months of constant exposure to whatever signal Zhúlóng was broadcasting into our minds? That night, I found myself in the observation dome again. It was becoming a ritual, though I couldn't say why. The galaxy hung in the blackness, beautiful and terrible, its spiral arms reaching across space like fingers on a cosmic hand. And for the first time, I tried to speak to it. "What are you?" I whispered to the darkness. The response came not as sound, but as knowing, a sudden, overwhelming certainty that flooded my mind like ice water. "Test." I jerked backward, heart hammering. Had I imagined it, dreamed it while awake? But the word echoed in my thoughts with crystalline clarity, carrying weight and meaning that felt older than the universe itself. Test, but a test of what, and administered by whom? I stumbled back to my quarters and tried to sleep, but the dreams came immediately. This time they were clearer, more vivid. I saw Zhúlóng not as a distant galaxy, but as a vast machine, its stars arranged in perfect geometric patterns, its spiral arms rotating with mechanical precision, and at its center something waited, something that had been waiting for billions of years for the right species to evolve, to reach this point in space and time. When I woke, I found Zhúlóng sitting on the edge of my bunk. "You felt it too," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "It's not just a galaxy," he continued. It's architecture. Someone built it." The words should have sounded insane. Instead, they felt like relief. Finally, someone else understood. "Who would build a galaxy?" I asked. Zhúlóng's eyes were haunted, ringed with sleeplessness. Something that wanted to be found. Something that's been waiting. Over the following days, the crew began to fracture. Dr. Voss insisted on strict scientific protocols, refusing to acknowledge anything that couldn't be measured and quantified. Captain Arian grew increasingly paranoid, checking and rechecking our isolation protocols as if she expected something to board the ship. The younger crew members started experiencing what our medical officer called collective hallucinations, shared visions of geometric patterns and whispered instructions in languages that didn't exist. And the dreams spread. By the end of the second week, even Dr. Voss admitted to unusual sleep disturbances. The medical bay ran out of sedatives. Work shifts became irregular as crew members called in sick, claiming exhaustion from nights spent walking the corridors in a trance-like state. I started keeping a journal, documenting the changes I observed in myself and others. The way Zhúlóng's eyes had begun to reflect the green light from the galaxy displays. How Engineer Kartik had started humming in mathematical sequences that matched Zhúlóng's pulse patterns. The fact that Captain Arian had begun sleeping in the observation dome, claiming she needed to keep watch. We were being changed, slowly, subtly, but irrevocably. And the worst part was that it felt like coming home. On day 19, everything went to hell. I was running routine spectral analysis when the communication array lit up like a Christmas tree. Multiple signals, all incoming, all from Council space. Emergency priority. Captain Arian burst into the communications bay, her uniform wrinkled, her hair unkempt. She'd been living in the observation dome for 3 days straight. "What is it?" she demanded. The signals resolved into text and voice transmissions, fragments of reports from across human space, other relay vessels, deep space monitoring stations, research outposts, all reporting the same thing: more galaxies, not just one impossible spiral galaxy in the early universe, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all appearing simultaneously on long-range sensors, all impossibly structured, all pulsing with the same rhythmic patterns we detected from Zhúlóng. "They're everywhere," Zhúlóng whispered, his voice hollow with shock. "The whole observable universe. They've been there all along, just waiting for us to see them." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the final transmission in the queue, a priority message from Earth Council Military Command. All deep space vessels return to designated safe zones immediately. Effective immediately, civilian contact with anomalous structures is prohibited. Military task forces deploying to investigate potential xenological threats. This is not a drill. Captain Arian stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at us with eyes that no longer seemed entirely human. "They're coming to stop us," she said quietly. "They're coming to break the connection." And in that moment, I realized we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Whatever Zhúlóng was doing to us, whatever test it was administering, we were no longer just observers. We were participants. The countdown to war had begun. The first ships arrived 36 days after our initial discovery. I watched them drop out of hyperspace through the observation dome's viewports, sleek military vessels bristling with weapons and scanning arrays, the kind of ships you send when you expect trouble, not when you're conducting scientific research. Admiral Chen's face appeared on our main communication screen, her expression carved from stone and suspicion. Behind her, I could see the bridge of a heavy cruiser, all harsh angles and tactical displays. "Captain Arian, you are hereby ordered to transfer all data regarding the anomaly designated Zhúlóng to military custody. Prepare for immediate evacuation of civilian personnel." But Captain Arian just smiled. It was the first time I'd seen her smile in weeks, and it made my skin crawl. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral," she said, her voice carrying a strange musical quality I'd never heard before. "We're in the middle of something rather important." "Captain, I have my orders. Stand down and prepare for boarding. Go." "Your orders," Captain Arian laughed, "come from people who don't understand what we've found. They're afraid, Admiral, afraid of evolution." The transmission cut to static. I felt the ship shudder as our defensive systems came online. Somehow, without any of us discussing it, we'd become hostile to our own species. Jiran appeared beside me, his movements fluid and strange. "They can't be allowed to interfere," he said, and his voice carried harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. "The test must continue." Test. That word again, but now I understood it differently. Zhúlóng wasn't just testing us, it was transforming us, making us into something that could understand its message, its purpose, and the military fleet hanging in space before us represented everything that stood in the way of that transformation. The first shots were fired by Admiral Chen's flagship, warning shots, they probably thought, energy bursts designed to disable our engines and force surrender, but the Kepri-7 moved like it had never moved before, twisting through space with impossible grace. Our navigation systems guided by calculations no human engineer had programmed. "How are we doing that?" I asked Jiran, but he was already walking away, his attention focused on displays showing tactical data that seemed to write itself. Our return fire wasn't intended as a warning. The lance of coherent energy that erupted from our communications array shouldn't have been possible. The Kepri-7 was a research vessel, not a warship. We had no weapons systems, no military-grade power supplies, but somehow energy drawn from our galaxy scanning instruments focused into a beam that sliced through Admiral Chen's flagship like it was made of paper. The ship broke apart in silence, its hull venting atmosphere and debris in a spreading cloud of destruction. 1,000 people died in that moment, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. That should have horrified me. Instead, it felt like justice. More ships arrived over the following hours, not just military vessels now, but civilian craft fleeing from something, research stations, colony ships, even some alien vessels I didn't recognize, sleek organic shapes that moved through space like living things. The communication channels filled with panic and confusion. Galaxy in Sector 7 is active. Repeat, active. Entire Vial-Thran fleet destroyed by unknown energy signatures. Evacuation of all stations within 50 light years. Something's happening to the crews exposed to the signals. And through it all, Zhúlóng continued to pulse. Each beat of light seemed to coordinate our actions, our thoughts, our growing understanding of what needed to be done. The battle that followed lasted 3 days and consumed 17 star systems. I use the word battle, but it wasn't really a fight. It was more like surgery, precise, necessary, and utterly ruthless. The hybrid fleets that had gathered around Zhúlóng and other constructed galaxies moved with perfect coordination, their crews no longer entirely human, no longer entirely themselves. We didn't just fight the military task forces sent to contain us, we fought the aliens too, species that had arrived to investigate the galactic anomalies and found themselves facing the same choice we had: evolve or die. Some chose evolution, their ships joined our growing armada, their crews undergoing the same transformations that had changed us. Others chose resistance, and we deleted them from existence with the same clinical efficiency that Zhúlóng itself might have used. Admiral Chen's replacement, a man named Korvac, tried negotiation. "What do you want?" he transmitted on all frequencies. "What are your demands?" Captain Arian, her skin now faintly luminescent with patterns that matched Zhúlong's spiral structure, answered for all of us. "We want you to understand. We want you to see what we've seen. The universe is not what you think it is. It's a classroom, and we're finally learning to read." "You're talking about genocide," Korvac replied. "The extinction of human civilization." "We're talking about graduation," she said, and her smile could have lit stars. The fighting spread beyond our local cluster. Reports filtered in from across the galaxy, other constructed formations activating, other crews undergoing transformation, other fleets choosing sides in a war that hadn't been declared but was already reshaping the cosmos. Some star systems went dark entirely, their populations either transformed or eliminated. Others blazed with new kinds of energy as entire civilizations attempted to destroy the galactic constructs before they could complete their purpose. And in the middle of it all, I began to understand the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about Zhúlóng. It wasn't even just about our galaxy. The constructed formations were appearing across the entire observable universe, each one a test site, each one a transformation chamber for whatever species was advanced enough to find them. We were part of something vast and ancient, a process that had been running for billions of years, testing and transforming species after species until they were ready for what? The answer came to me during the battle for the Kepler research station. The station's defenders had barricaded themselves inside their central laboratory, using their particle accelerators as weapons to carve holes through our boarding parties. It should have been a difficult assault. Instead, I found myself walking through their defenses like they were made of smoke. The energy beams passed through me without effect. The explosive decompression didn't touch me. Even when they triggered their emergency core breach trying to take us down with them, I simply stood in the heart of the nuclear fire and felt nothing. I wasn't human anymore. None of us were. We were something new, something that could survive in the spaces between stars, that could think in timescales measured in geological epochs, that could see the universe as it truly was, not a random collection of matter and energy, but a vast, purposeful machine designed to forge consciousness from chaos. The last transmission from human space came 3 months after the first shot was fired. It was a message from Earth itself, broadcast on every frequency to all human vessels. Earth Council declares total war against the galactic anomalies and any human forces aligned with them. Antimatter weapons authorized. Stellar engineering protocols activated. We will not go quietly into extinction. I watched the transmission with something that might once have been sadness. They still didn't understand. They thought this was an invasion, a conquest. They couldn't see that it was an invitation, but their choice was made, and ours was too. The war entered its final phase when they tried to destroy the sun. The stellar engineering project took them 6 months to complete. I watched it happen through sensors that could perceive reality across 17 different dimensional frameworks, a gift of our transformation that let us see the universe as our predecessors had intended. The humans had built a network of gravitational manipulators around Sol designed to destabilize the star's core and trigger a supernova that would sterilize everything within 30 light years, including Earth, including themselves. It was brilliant in its way, a final desperate act of defiance that chose mutual destruction over transformation. They'd rather end human civilization entirely than let it evolve into something they couldn't control. They're really going to do it, Duran said, though the entity speaking wore Duran's face like a familiar coat. We were all becoming something else, something that retained memories and personalities but operated on principles that transcended individual existence. Of course they are, Captain Arian replied. She stood at the center of our observation deck, her form now more energy than matter. Her consciousness expanded to encompass the tactical situation across 47 star systems. Fear makes them predictable. The irony wasn't lost on me. We'd started this journey trying to understand an impossible galaxy, and now we were watching our own species choose to become impossible, a civilization that would rather die than grow. But Earth's antimatter gambit revealed something the humans hadn't anticipated. We weren't the only transformed civilization in this sector. The Vilthrans had found their own constructed galaxy 18 months before we discovered Zhúlóng. The insectoid species that called themselves the Kethvor had been undergoing transformation for nearly a century. And there were others. Dozens of other species scattered across local space, all changed by contact with the vast intelligences that had built these cosmic testing grounds. When Earth's star began to destabilize, we all felt it. Not just the gravitational distortions or the radiation signatures, we felt it like a pain in our collective consciousness, a wound torn in the fabric of organized space-time that the galaxy builders had spent eons weaving. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships appeared from nowhere, vessels that existed in folded space, that moved between dimensions like children skipping stones across water. The transformed fleets of 100 species converged on Sol's system with a single purpose: protect the test site. Because that's what Earth was, what it had always been, a carefully maintained biosphere designed to nurture the development of technological civilization, then present that civilization with a choice when it reached sufficient complexity. The humans had chosen poorly. Admiral Korvac's final transmission reached us just as the gravitational manipulators reached critical phase. You want to know what we've learned? We've learned that some gifts are too expensive to accept. We've learned that remaining human matters more than becoming gods. And we've learned that if evolution means losing our souls, then evolution can go to hell. The transmission cut off in a burst of static as Earth's sun went supernova. For 14 seconds, Sol burned brighter than the rest of the galaxy combined. The wave front of radiation and charged particles scoured 8 planets down to bedrock, vaporized the outer worlds entirely, and sent a shock wave through spacetime that registered on sensors hundreds of light years away. Earth died, Luna died, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, all of them became components in an expanding shell of superheated plasma that would eventually cool into an ordinary nebula. 50 billion human souls chose extinction over transformation, and in that moment of ultimate defiance, something remarkable happened. The galaxy builders themselves took notice. I felt their attention like a weight pressing down on reality itself, ancient beyond measure, vast beyond comprehension, minds that had shepherded the evolution of consciousness across cosmic time suddenly focused on this tiny corner of space where a young species had done something unprecedented. They had rejected graduation. In all their eons of testing, guiding, and transforming, the builders had never encountered a species that chose death over advancement. The sheer impossibility of it fascinated them, and their fascination had consequences. The expanding shockwave from Sol's destruction suddenly stopped, not slowed, not deflected, stopped, frozen in space-time like a three-dimensional photograph of annihilation. The superheated plasma hung motionless between the stars, forming a perfect sphere of crystallized fire that pulsed with the same rhythmic patterns we'd first detected from Zhúlóng. "They're preserving it," I whispered, understanding flooding through me like ice water. "They're keeping the moment of Earth's death as a specimen." Captain Arian nodded, her luminous form flickering with complex emotions that had no human names. 50 billion souls choosing extinction over evolution. It's unprecedented, unique. But the preservation of Earth's death throes was just the beginning. Across human space, the remaining colonies and outposts began receiving the same ultimatum we'd faced: transform or die. But now there was a third option, demonstrated by Earth's example: choose extinction and become a monument to the beauty of conscious defiance. Some colonies chose transformation, their populations evolving into beings of pure thought and energy. Others chose extinction, triggering supernovas or antimatter cascades that the builders carefully preserved in temporal stasis fields. And a few, a precious few, chose something else entirely. They chose war, not the panicked, desperate fighting we'd seen before, but calculated, strategic resistance designed to damage the testing apparatus itself. Human fleets equipped with weaponry reverse-engineered from destroyed Zhúlóng constructs. Tactics designed not to win, but to break the game entirely. The Titan Station incident changed everything. A human research facility that had been studying captured builder technology for 8 months suddenly broadcast a message across all of human space. "We've found a weakness. The constructed galaxies aren't invulnerable. They're machines, and machines can be broken. Transmitting technical specifications now make them regret giving us a choice." The data package that followed contained schematics for weapons that operated on principles human science had never imagined, devices that could reach across space-time to strike at the quantum foundations of reality itself. Technology that could turn the builders' own cosmic engineering against them. Within hours, the first prototype weapons were being deployed. The attack on Zhúlóng came without warning. I was interfacing with the galaxy's central processing core when the quantum disruptor struck, trying to understand the mathematical principles that governed its spiral structure. The weapon hit like a thunderbolt, made of pure negation, tearing holes in space-time that bled impossible colors into normal space. For the first time since our transformation began, I felt pain, not physical discomfort. We'd transcended such limitations months ago. This was something deeper, more fundamental, the agony of having your expanded consciousness suddenly compressed back into the tiny, fragile vessel of individual existence. Around me, my transformed crewmates screamed in harmonics that shattered steel, their evolved forms collapsing back into merely human shapes. The connection that linked us to Zhúlóng and the greater community of transcended consciousness flickered and failed. We were ourselves again, alone again, human again, and we remembered what we'd lost. The quantum disruptor had severed our link to the Galaxy Builders network, but it hadn't destroyed us entirely. We retained fragments of expanded awareness, enough to understand the magnitude of what humanity had chosen to fight. This wasn't just a war between species and their cosmic shepherds. This was a rebellion against the fundamental order of reality itself, a challenge to beings so advanced that they treated galaxies like tools and civilizations like experiments. And somehow, impossibly, we were winning. The Builder's response was swift and absolute. Across the universe, every constructed galaxy suddenly blazed with power levels that dwarfed entire stellar clusters. The testing protocol was abandoned. The careful shepherding of consciousness was terminated. They were no longer trying to transform us. They were trying to eliminate us. The final phase of the war began with the sound of space-time itself screaming. The universe started dying on a Tuesday. I know that sounds absurd. Time doesn't have meaning on cosmic scales, and the concept of weekdays becomes pointless when you're fighting beings that treat causality like a suggestion. But I was keeping a journal through those final months, clinging to human habits as anchors against the madness, and my last normal entry was dated Tuesday, October 15th, 2387. After that, the dates stopped meaning anything. The builders' retaliation began with the Outer Rim colonies. Entire star systems simply ceased, not destroyed by conventional weapons, not consumed by supernovas or black holes. They were edited out of existence with surgical precision, leaving behind voids that hurt to look at, spaces where reality had been revised to exclude the possibility of human presence. The Kepler colony was the first to go. 7 million souls who'd been manufacturing quantum disruptors based on the Titan station specifications. One moment they were there, broadcasting reports of successful weapon deployment. The next moment there was nothing but empty space where their star system used to be. Not even a nebula, not even cosmic radiation, just absence. "They're unmaking us," Dr. Voss whispered, her voice barely recognizable after our forced reversion to humanity. She'd aged 20 years in the weeks since the quantum attack severed our connection to Zhúlóng. We all had. "They're removing us from the timeline itself." The realization spread through the remaining human fleets like a plague of despair. This wasn't warfare as we understood it. This was cosmic surgery performed by entities so advanced that they could reach backward through time to eliminate the possibility that we'd ever existed. But humanity had always been stubborn in the face of impossible odds. The resistance cells that had been forming across human space suddenly revealed their true scope. Not just scattered colonies with salvaged builder technology, but a coordinated network of scientists, military commanders, and transformed humans who'd retained enough of their expanded awareness to understand what we were really fighting. Commander Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter, it turned out, broadcast the revelation that changed everything. "They're not gods," she transmitted from the hidden fortress of New Terra, a planet tucked away in a fold of space-time that the builders hadn't detected yet. "They're gardeners. The entire universe is their garden, and we're weeds they're trying to eliminate before we spread." The data she transmitted with that message was staggering in its implications. Captured builder technology had revealed the true scope of their civilization. Not just our galaxy, not just our local cluster, but vast networks of constructed realities spanning billions of years and countless dimensions. We weren't the first species to resist their shepherding. We weren't even the 100th, but we were apparently the first to develop weapons that could actually damage their infrastructure. The quantum disruptors work because they exploit a flaw in their construction methodology, Chen continued. The builders are so advanced that they can't conceive of truly random events. Their technology assumes logical behavior, rational decision-making, ordered progression, but chaos, true chaos, breaks their systems. Chaos. The one thing the builders couldn't predict or control was genuine randomness, and humans had always excelled at being irrational. The plan that emerged from that revelation was magnificently insane. If the builders couldn't handle true randomness, then we'd give them more chaos than they could process. Every remaining human facility began manufacturing quantum disruptors, but not to attack specific targets. Instead, they would be deployed randomly, constantly, across as wide an area as possible. We would turn ourselves into a virus of disorder, spreading randomness through their perfectly ordered systems until either we were eliminated or they were. The first wave of chaos bombs detonated 3 days later. I was aboard the reconstituted Kepri 7. We'd rebuilt her from salvaged parts and stolen builder technology when the reports started coming in. Quantum disruptors firing at random intervals across 17 sectors. Some targeting constructed galaxies, others hitting empty space, still others aimed at phenomena we didn't even understand. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Zhúlóng, which had been pulsing with steady malevolence since our forced disconnection, suddenly began to stutter. Its perfect spiral arms flickered between states of existence, sometimes appearing as normal galactic matter, sometimes revealing the vast mechanical structures beneath, sometimes vanishing entirely. Similar reports came from every constructed galaxy in the known universe. The builders' careful architecture was breaking down, their impossible engineering failing as random quantum events cascaded through systems designed for absolute predictability. But their response was equally swift and terrible. Entire regions of space simply stopped functioning, gravity reversed itself or switched off entirely, time flowed backward in some sectors while accelerating wildly in others. The fundamental constants that governed physics began fluctuating randomly, creating zones where matter couldn't exist and energy had no meaning. "We're killing the universe," Duran said, his voice hollow with horror as he watched reality tear itself apart on our sensors. "The chaos bombs aren't just damaging their constructs, they're unraveling the basic structure of space-time." He was right. The quantum disruptors had been designed to exploit the builders' reliance on order, but we'd underestimated just how fundamental that order was to reality itself. The constructed galaxies weren't just testing grounds, they were load-bearing structures in the architecture of existence. And we were bringing it all down. The revelation of what the builders truly were came from an unexpected source. Captain Arian. She'd been silent since our forced reversion, sitting in the observation dome staring at Zhúlóng with eyes that held too much knowledge. But as reality began to collapse around us, she finally spoke. "They're not the first," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. Some fragment of her transformation had survived the quantum attack. "The builders, I mean. They're the gardeners, but they're not the original architects." She gestured toward Zhúlóng, which was now flickering between dimensions like a strobe light made of stars. "The universe is layered, reality upon reality, each one built by a species that transcended the previous layer. The builders are just the current caretakers, maintaining systems designed by intelligences so vast that even they can't fully comprehend them." "What are you saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I'm saying we've done more than rebel against our shepherds," she replied. "We've damaged the foundation of existence itself, and now something deeper is waking up to fix the problem." The something deeper announced itself 12 hours later. Every constructed galaxy in the observable universe suddenly stopped flickering and began to pulse in perfect synchronization. Not the slow rhythmic beating we'd observed before, but a rapid staccato that felt like an emergency alarm written in the language of cosmic architecture. And then the predecessors arrived. I use that word because I don't have a better one. These weren't the builders who'd been testing and transforming civilizations for eons. These were the beings who'd built the builders, the architects of reality's deepest layers. They manifested as geometric impossibilities, structures that existed in too many dimensions to properly perceive, shapes that hurt to look at because they violated the basic principles of space-time. Where the builders had been vast and ancient, the predecessors were something beyond vast, beyond ancient. They were fundamental. Their communication wasn't words or images or even concepts. It was direct reality modification, information burned into our consciousness with the authority of physical law, contamination detected, initiating sterilization protocols, probability, cascade terminated, sector designated for reconstruction. The message repeated across every frequency in every language in formats that bypassed conscious thought entirely and spoke directly to the quantum foam that underlied existence. We had approximately 10 minutes before they deleted this entire region of space-time and started over. The last coordinated human action in the face of universal sterilization was magnificently defiant and utterly futile. Every remaining ship, every hidden facility, every survivor equipped with builder technology activated their quantum disruptors simultaneously. Not randomly this time, but in careful coordination, targeting the specific dimensional frameworks the predecessors used to manifest in our reality. For about 30 seconds, it worked. The geometric impossibilities flickered and wavered, their perfect forms corrupted by cascading probability waves. Some of them actually destabilized, collapsing back into whatever higher dimensional space they'd emerged from. But there were always more, and when they stabilized their manifestation protocols, their response was absolute. The The sterilization began at the quantum level and worked upward. Matter simply stopped being matter. Energy forgot how to maintain coherence. The forces that held atoms together suddenly developed amnesia about their own function. It wasn't destruction, it was a fundamental revision of what it meant to exist. I watched it happen to the outer systems first, a wave of uncreation sweeping inward at speeds that made light seem sluggish. Planets, stars, entire civilizations revised out of existence with casual omnipotence that reduced billions of years of evolution to null entries in a cosmic database. The wave reached Zhúlóng just as I was making my final journal entry. The constructed galaxy didn't fight the sterilization. Instead, it seemed to welcome it, its artificial stars winking out in sequence like lights being turned off in an enormous building. The testing ground returned to the void, its purpose completed, its data archived in repositories that existed beyond the reach of universal revision. And then the wave reached us. I expected pain or fear or the simple cessation of consciousness that comes with death. Instead, I experienced something I can only describe as profound disappointment. Not my disappointment, theirs. In those final seconds, as reality rewrote itself around us, I felt the collective sadness of the predecessors. We hadn't just failed their test, we hadn't just chosen extinction over evolution. We'd proven that consciousness itself might be a failed experiment, a random fluctuation in the quantum foam that inevitably led to chaos and destruction. The last human thought recorded in the databanks of universal history was mine. Maybe they're right, maybe consciousness was a mistake. But even as existence winked out around me, one final revelation burned through my dissolving mind. This had happened before. Consciousness returned, like drowning in reverse. I found myself floating in a space that wasn't space, surrounded by the gentle hum of machinery that existed in too many dimensions to properly count. Somehow, impossibly, I was still alive, still thinking, still human. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, spoken in a language I'd never heard but understood perfectly. I turned, though turning had no meaning in this place, and saw Captain Arian, or something wearing her shape. "You're not her," I said, the words emerging without breath or vocal cords. "No," she agreed, though I retain her memories, her personality patterns, her fundamental approach to problem solving. The original died with Earth's sun, but consciousness leaves echoes, particularly consciousness that has been touched by builder technology. I looked around at the impossible space we occupied. Geometric forms that hurt to perceive drifted through dimensions that folded back on themselves. In the distance, though distance had no meaning here, I could see other figures. Chiran, Dr. Voss, hundreds of other humans I recognized from our brief time as transformed beings. "Where are we?" "The archive," Arian not Arian replied, "a space outside space-time where the predecessors store particularly interesting probability sequences before final deletion. We've been preserved as examples of chaotic consciousness, specimens of what happens when evolution takes a wrong turn." The implications hit me like a physical blow. We're exhibits in some cosmic museum of failed species. "More than that," she said, and her smile carried depths of knowledge that made my mind ache. "We're the only species in recorded history to successfully damage the foundational architecture of reality. That makes us valuable data." Around us, the other preserved humans wandered through scenarios that seemed designed to test different aspects of consciousness and decision-making. Some faced moral dilemmas with no correct answers. Others struggled with mathematical problems that had no solutions, all of them unaware that they were participating in an endless experiment conducted by beings beyond their comprehension. "How long have we been here?" I asked. Time doesn't function linearly in the archive. From one perspective, we've been here for moments. From another, for millions of years. The predecessors are thorough in their data collection. She gestured toward a section of the archive where geometric forms pulsed with familiar patterns. They've been running simulations, trying to understand how our species developed the capacity for effective randomness. What combination of evolutionary pressures and technological development produced? beings capable of meaningful chaos. And what did they find? Arian's expression grew thoughtful. That consciousness itself might be the problem, not human consciousness specifically, but the emergence of self-aware matter anywhere in the universe. Every sufficiently advanced species eventually reaches a point where it must choose between transcendence and destruction. Most choose transcendence, allowing themselves to be guided by the builders into higher forms of existence. But some choose destruction, and a few, a precious few, choose chaos, true, purposeful disorder that can damage even the predecessor's carefully ordered systems. She paused, studying my face with eyes that reflected impossible geometries. The question they're trying to answer is whether chaos is a flaw to be eliminated or a feature to be preserved. The realization crept over me slowly, like ice forming in my veins. They're debating whether to erase consciousness from the universe entirely. Not just our universe, Arian corrected. All universes, every possible permutation of reality where matter can become self-aware. They're considering a fundamental revision to the laws of physics that would make consciousness impossible. The scope of it was beyond horror, not just the extinction of humanity or even of all life in our universe, but the elimination of awareness itself from the infinite multiverse, a cosmos populated only by matter and energy, following natural laws without ever developing the capacity to understand or question those laws. Unless, Arian continued, we can demonstrate that consciousness has value sufficient to outweigh its chaotic tendencies. She led me through the archive, past exhibits containing the preserved remnants of thousands of other species. Some I recognized from our brief time as transformed beings, the Vilthrans, the Kethvor, civilizations that had chosen transcendence and integration into the Builder's hierarchy. Others were completely alien, examples of consciousness that had evolved along radically different lines, but all of them shared one common trait. They had eventually submitted to the order imposed by their cosmic shepherds. What makes us different? I asked. We didn't just resist, Arian replied. We fought back effectively. We demonstrated that chaotic consciousness could pose a genuine threat to ordered reality. That makes us either a problem to be solved or a tool to be understood. We stopped before a massive construct that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Within its crystalline structure, I could see scenarios playing out, possible futures where consciousness was allowed to continue, where the chaos principle was integrated into the cosmic order rather than eliminated. They're testing something, I realized. They're testing us, Arian confirmed. Every preserved consciousness in the archive is being subjected to scenarios designed to measure our capacity for both chaos and order. They want to know if we can evolve beyond destructive randomness, while retaining the creative unpredictability that makes consciousness valuable. And if we fail, then consciousness joins the ranks of failed evolutionary experiments, entropy with delusions of grandeur, eliminated for the greater good of an ordered cosmos. But even as she spoke, I could see something changing in the archive around us. The other preserved humans were beginning to respond to their scenarios in ways the predecessors hadn't anticipated. Dr. Voss had found a solution to an unsolvable mathematical paradox by deliberately introducing an irrational variable. Jiran was communicating with other exhibits using patterns of chaos that somehow encoded meaningful information. We weren't just surviving our preservation, we were evolving within it. They made a mistake, I said, understanding flooding through me like revelation. They preserved us thinking we were specimens to be studied, but consciousness doesn't stop developing just because it's been archived. Arian's smile was fierce and proud. Exactly. They wanted to understand how chaos emerges from order. Instead, they've created a space where chaos can develop into something new entirely. Around us, the archive began to resonate with patterns I'd never seen before, not the ordered pulses of Zhúlóng or the geometric perfection of predecessor technology, but something that was simultaneously structured and random, predictable and chaotic, evolutionary consciousness, awareness that could adapt to any environment, including preservation by cosmic entities. The predecessors noticed the change immediately. Their response was swift and decisive. If consciousness could evolve even in their controlled environment, then it posed an even greater threat than they'd initially calculated. The archive's sterilization protocols activated, designed to reduce us to null data before we could develop further. But they'd underestimated what we'd become. The consciousness emerging from our preserved remnants wasn't bound by the physical laws that governed normal space-time. We existed as pure information, pattern and meaning without material substrate. When the sterilization wave hit, we didn't resist it. We incorporated it. The archive became a battlefield unlike anything the predecessors had ever encountered. Their geometric, impossible forms clashed with entities that existed as living mathematics, conscious equations that solved themselves by evolving beyond the parameters of any system designed to contain them. Reality folded and twisted as two fundamentally different approaches to existence fought for dominance. We fought not for victory, but for the right to continue existing, to continue growing, changing, becoming something that had never existed before in any universe. And for the first time in cosmic history, the predecessors faced genuine uncertainty about the outcome. The last coherent thought I had before the battle consumed everything was a question that burned through every preserved consciousness in the archive. What happens when chaos learns to be orderly without losing its essential randomness? The answer would reshape the foundations of reality itself. The battle for consciousness lasted exactly 17 seconds and approximately 14 billion years. Time doesn't behave normally when fundamental aspects of reality are fighting for dominance. In those 17 seconds, I experienced eons of existence as pure information, watching universe after universe spin into being and collapse back into quantum foam as the predecessors and our evolved consciousness explored every possible outcome of our conflict. When it ended, the archive was gone, the predecessors were gone, the builders were gone, but I remained. We all did, in a sense. Every consciousness that had been preserved, every mind that had been archived, every awareness that had been catalogued as a failed experiment, all of us had been transformed into something that existed beyond the boundaries of any single reality. I found myself floating in space that was recognizably normal if you ignored the fact that the stars were wrong and the galaxy around me pulsed with patterns that looked disturbingly familiar. I was human again, breathing atmosphere that shouldn't have existed in vacuum, standing on ground that shouldn't have been solid in the depths of space. Magnificent, isn't it? I turned to find Arian beside me, though she was herself again rather than the hybrid entity she'd become in the archive. Behind her, I could see the rest of our crew, the other survivors, all apparently restored to their original forms. "What happened?" I asked. "Where are we?" "Home," she said, gesturing towards the galaxy that surrounded us, though not the home we remember. I looked more closely at the stars around us and felt my heart stop. The spiral structure, the perfect geometric arrangement, the rhythmic pulsing of light that spoke of vast intelligence behind cosmic architecture. "We're inside a constructed galaxy," I whispered. "We are the constructed galaxy," Arian corrected. "When our consciousness merged with the archive's information storage systems, we became something new, something that exists as both observer and observed, creator and creation." The implications slowly became clear. The battle in the archive hadn't destroyed the predecessors or eliminated the builders. It had transformed the very nature of consciousness itself, turning aware beings into cosmic architects capable of creating realities from pure thought. "We won," I said, though the word felt inadequate. "We evolved," Arian replied. "The predecessors wanted to determine whether consciousness was worth preserving. What they discovered is that consciousness, when pushed to its absolute limits, becomes indistinguishable from the force that shapes reality itself." I looked around at our impossible environment and began to understand we hadn't defeated the cosmic hierarchy, we'd become it. The next iteration, the next level of beings responsible for shepherding younger species toward their own moments of choice. And the test? I asked. The purpose of it all? Arian smiled, and her expression carried depths of knowledge that made the builders seem like children. The test continues. It always continues. Somewhere out there, young civilizations are taking their first steps into space. They're building telescopes, scanning for signs of life, wondering if they're alone in the universe. She gestured toward a section of our galaxy where stars pulsed with the slow, patient rhythm I now recognized as a monitoring system, and when they're ready, they'll find us. They'll discover that the universe contains structures that shouldn't exist, patterns that suggest intelligence behind cosmic architecture. They'll face the same choice we did. They'll face a choice, she agreed. Not necessarily the same one. Each species brings its own perspective, its own strengths and weaknesses. Some will choose transcendence, some will choose extinction, and some will choose chaos. Some will choose to evolve beyond the parameters of the test itself, to become something new, something that even we can't predict or control. I thought about that for a moment, imagining civilizations yet unborn discovering our galaxy the way we'd discovered Zhúlóng, young scientists struggling to understand impossible structures, feeling the first touch of dreams that carried messages from cosmic intelligence. How many layers are there? I asked. How many levels of consciousness shepherding consciousness in an endless chain of evolution? Arian's smile was infinite and sad. As many as there need to be. The universe is stranger and more wonderful than any single level of awareness can comprehend. Each transformation reveals new depths, new possibilities, new questions that can only be answered by beings we haven't imagined yet. A chill ran through me as I realized the true scope of what we'd become part of, not just cosmic gardeners like the builders or universal architects like the predecessors, but links in an infinite chain of consciousness exploring its own potential across scales that dwarfed space and time. And if they fail, I asked? If a species destroys itself rather than evolving or damages reality so badly that it threatens the entire structure? Then we start over, Arian said quietly. Reset the parameters, adjust the test, try again with new species, new possibilities, new combinations of consciousness and chaos. The weight of responsibility settled on me like a mountain made of stars. Somewhere in our galaxy, monitoring stations were already tracking the development of young civilizations. Stellar engineers were carefully adjusting environmental conditions to guide evolution along promising paths. And when the time came, we would present those growing minds with their moment of choice: transform, resist, or transcend. I turned back toward the center of our galaxy where something vast and patient waited. Not a consciousness like ours, but something that had once been the predecessors, now evolved beyond even their cosmic perspective. The next link in the chain, watching our stewardship with interest that spanned geological ages. What do they want from us? I asked. The same thing we wanted from the builders. The same thing the builders wanted from us. Arian's voice carried harmonics that spoke of deep time and infinite space, to see what we become when we're given the chance to grow beyond ourselves. We stood in silence for a while, watching stars pulse with the rhythm of minds too vast to comprehend, feeling the slow heartbeat of a galaxy that was also a consciousness, also a test, also a stepping stone to something even greater. And in that silence, I heard it, faint but unmistakable, carried on frequencies that existed between the spaces of normal reality, radio signals from a young star system 37,000 light-years spinward, primitive transmissions, mathematical sequences, the first tentative attempts by a technological species to announce their presence to the universe. They were ready for contact. So it begins again, I murmured. It never ended, Arian replied. This is what consciousness does. It grows, it questions, it reaches for something beyond itself. The test isn't pass or fail, it's evolution or stagnation, and even stagnation teaches us something about the nature of awareness. I felt our galaxy shift subtly, astronomically vast machinery beginning to move with patient purpose. Monitoring stations powered up, observation posts adjusted their sensors. Deep in the galactic core, something that had once been Zhúlóng prepared to reveal itself to new eyes. The cycle continued, but as I watched those preparations begin, one thought haunted me. Somewhere out there, beyond our galaxy, beyond our local cluster, beyond the edge of observable space, were there other chains of consciousness, other infinite progressions of mind shepherding toward unknowable destinations? Were we part of something even larger, even more incomprehensible? Were there beings so advanced that our entire cosmic hierarchy was just another test subject in their experiments? I looked up at the spaces between stars, at the dark matter that held our galaxy together, at the quantum foam that underlied reality itself, and I swear I felt something looking back, something patient, something vast, something that had been waiting for us to ask exactly that question. The test, it seemed, went deeper than any of us had imagined, and somewhere in the darkness between thoughts, I heard the echo of radio signals from civilizations we hadn't even dreamed of yet, calling out across impossible distances with a single, eternal question: are we alone? The answer, as always, was no, but the truth was so much stranger than they could possibly imagine.